The IV bag above me was halfway through. Each drip echoed softly against the metal pole, like a metronome ticking down whatever patience I had left. My arm was sore, the tape pulling at skin that was already bruised. The room smelled like antiseptic dry sheets and something faintly metallic, the ghost of blood I'd coughed up earlier. Across the room, a mother peeled an apple for her college-aged daughter. She was scolding her gently. "You have to take care of yourself better than this," she murmured. There was warmth in her voice. I tried not to listen. My phone buzzed on the tray table. It was my mother. I had called her 17 times during the worst of my fever. No answer, no call back, just silence. I picked up my mouth, already dry and sticky. "Mom!" I wheezed. My throat was raw and the effort triggered another coughing fit. Her voice was bright cheerful, as if nothing had happened. "Make sure the car's cleaned up when you get back tonight." I blinked. I'm still in the hospital. She didn't acknowledge that. "Tomorrow morning we're taking your uncle and aunt on a road trip. You're driving. Make sure Kevin's seat is set up properly and bring snacks he likes, those sour cream chips, and the gummy worms." I blinked again. "Mom, I coughed hard, pressing my palm to my chest. "I'm still running a fever. I have pneumonia." She paused. "Are you getting out tomorrow?" "No. The doctor said I need at least another 5 days here." "You can ask them to prescribe something and take it with you. You've driven with worse, haven't you?" "I what?" "Kevin already told his co-workers we're bringing back souvenirs from the coast. He's excited, and you know how much he looks forward to these trips." My eyes burned from the fever or from something else. "Mom, I can't breathe right. They said my lungs sound like gravel." A beat. Then sharply, I told everyone you'd be the driver. "You don't want me to look like a liar, do you?" I pressed the phone tighter against my ear. "Are you serious right now? When I was sick, I still worked in the fields all day. You're young. Toughen up." My monitor started beeping erratically. A nurse walked in, saw my numbers, and frowned. She adjusted something on the IV stand. I didn't say another word, just stared at the ceiling tiles until the call dropped. An hour later, I got a text. "You've always been selfish. We gave you everything, and you can't even show up when we need you. Don't call me your mother if you're not here tomorrow." It wasn't about me. It was never about me. Not when I had chicken pox in 2nd grade and she left me home alone because she'd promised her friend she'd be at the spa. Not when I had my period for the first time and bled through my jeans at school. She was angry not because I was in pain, but because someone might have seen. Not when I failed my college entrance exam and she ripped up the results, then told everyone at church I got a scholarship to Berkeley. I thought maybe now that I was 27, now that I was sick and exhausted and barely able to sit up, she'd at least ask how I was doing. Instead, she made plans, told the entire extended family that I'd drive them across the state. She didn't want a daughter. She wanted a chauffeur with her last name. I dropped my phone back on the tray, turned my face to the wall, and let myself cry. Just a little, because this time it wasn't sadness. It was clarity. I was discharged 3 days later. Not because I was better, not really, but because the doctor said I could finish the antibiotics at home if I took it slow. And slow was something I had never been allowed to be. Not in this family. So I packed my duffel. My body still ached. I coughed so hard on the way to the parking lot that an older nurse stopped me concerned. "You sure you don't want to stay another night, honey?" I smiled weakly. I don't think my family would let me. That was the last thing I said before getting into the rideshare I'd scheduled. Not to my mother, not to my father, not to anyone waiting back home. Because of course they were waiting. When I walked into the house, the smell of garlic bread and pot roast hit me like a wall. The kitchen was loud, the dining room louder. Laughter, clinking glasses, someone telling a story that ended in exaggerated gasps and applause. I was supposed to be the grand entrance, the dutiful daughter returning home with keys in hand and lungs working fine. Instead, I dropped my bag near the door and quietly slipped off my shoes. My mother spotted me first. Finally, she said, rushing over with a too bright smile, "Uncle Martin and Aunt Cheryl were starting to think you weren't coming." She didn't mention the hospital. Not a word about my IV bruises or the bottle of cough syrup sticking out of my tote. She pulled me in for a quick hug and whispered, "Smile. They're already seated." And just like that, I was on stage again. I nodded at everyone, forced pleasantries. My voice cracked twice, and I blamed it on the drive. They laughed. Said I must be tired from getting the car ready. Asked what I bought. Volkswagen Passat, I said. My cousin Kevin raised an eyebrow. That's like mid-range, right? I shrugged. It gets me to work. That should have been the end of it. But this family thrived on performance, not facts, not truth, appearances. Dinner dragged. Every time I stopped smiling, my mother elbowed me under the table. Every time I stopped talking, someone asked another invasive question about promotions I didn't get about men, I wasn't dating about condos I wasn't even looking at. When I said I was between jobs, the table fell awkwardly silent. Then my father, already a few drinks in, laughed too loud and said, "She's just being dramatic. She's got interviews lined up. Right, sweetheart?" I didn't answer. The food turned to paste in my mouth. My skin itched under the fabric of my sweater. I wanted to be anywhere but there. By dessert, the mask slipped. My father leaned back in his chair, red-faced and smug. You know, he said, raising his wine glass, this one here, she wouldn't even come home if I didn't push. That car, she wasn't even going to show it to us. Everyone chuckled politely. She always thought she was better than us, he continued. Thinks she's too good for this family. I stood up. Not dramatically, just quietly. I walked my plate to the sink. I rinsed it. I dried my hands. When I turned around, everyone was watching me. "Thank you for dinner," I said. "I'm going to lie down for a bit." "You're not excused," my father snapped. I met his gaze. I wasn't asking. Then I left the room with the quiet click of a daughter who was finally done pretending. It was almost midnight when the knock came. I hadn't fallen asleep, just lay in bed staring at the ceiling, counting the seconds between coughs. The door opened without a word. My mother stepped in, arms crossed, expression flat. "We need you up at 6. I didn't move. She looked at me waiting, as if my silence was a malfunction she could correct. "You've had 2 days to recover," she said, her voice clipped. "Don't start playing sick again." "I'm not playing," I whispered. "You're always playing. With words, with emotions, with this family. You just don't like being useful." "Useful," I repeated. "You mean obedient?" She bristled. "I mean, we ask one thing, a simple drive. A simple drive. 6 hours with 6 people crammed into a car I hadn't even paid off yet while my lungs still felt like crushed leaves. A simple drive to satisfy a promise she made on my behalf, to show off a daughter she never really saw. I sat up slowly, coughing into my sleeve. What if I said no? "You already embarrassed us once," she snapped. "Don't make it worse." Worse for who? For everyone who counts on you. That sentence landed like ice water. Everyone who counts on you. Not everyone who loves you. Not everyone who cares if you live or die. Just the ones who expect things, who see you as a ride, a wallet, a symbol. I swung my legs off the bed. Her eyes lit up, mistaking motion for compliance. But I stood, looked her dead in the face, and said, "I'm not going." She blinked. "Excuse me, I'm not going." I repeated each word clearer. "I'm not driving anyone. I'm not waking up at 6. I'm not sacrificing my lungs so you can have a parade." The silence between us buzzed like electricity. Then she hissed, "If you don't take us tomorrow, don't bother calling yourself our daughter anymore." And there it was. The line. Drawn, threatened, weaponized. And for the first time in my life, I didn't flinch. I walked past her down the hall, out the front door. I sat in my car, and I locked the doors. She followed, knocking hard on the window. "You can't be serious." I turned the key. The engine roared to life. She banged again. "You'll regret this." Maybe I would. But I drove off anyway. Into the dark. Into the silence. Into a world where I didn't owe anyone a ride ever again. I spent the night in a parking lot outside a closed grocery store. Engine off. Hoodie zipped. Seat reclined. Not because I had nowhere to go, I had friends, motels, options. But I needed stillness. Space. Something no one else could take. By morning, I'd gone through a bottle of cough syrup, a half-pack of lozenges, and all the voices in my head. Ungrateful, selfish, a disappointment. Not my own voice, theirs. My parents' accusations had lived so long in my brain they'd become automatic. Like pop-up ads I'd forgotten how to block. I cracked the window, let in the cold. Then I reached for my phone. Dozens of missed calls, most from Mom, a few from Dad, one surprisingly from my aunt. And then I saw it. A video. Sent at 2:12 a.m. I tapped it open. The camera was shaky. My mother sat on the edge of her bedroom window, crying, talking to no one and everyone. My daughter doesn't love me, she sobbed. She left us. She won't even come back to take us on a family trip. After everything we gave her. Behind the phone, my father's voice muttered, "She wants us to die ashamed. She wants people to see us fall." A pause. Then loud enough to slice, "If we disappear, maybe then she'll care." I closed the video before it ended. Threw the phone onto the passenger seat. Sat there, quiet, frozen. They hadn't asked if I was okay. Hadn't said they were sorry. Hadn't once acknowledged what they'd done. They just found a new way to weaponize guilt. Suicide theatrics. Emotional blackmail. For a road trip, they never asked if I wanted to go on. For a car, they never helped pay for. For an image, they were determined to polish with my life. I leaned my head back and whispered, "This is who they are. Not parents, performers." And I was done being part of their act. I drove home, not to them, to my place, my space, my terms. And as I turned the lock behind me, I made a vow. Next time they show up with a threat, I'd show them a boundary. The fever had broken, but not the fatigue. I left the hospital with my backpack half-zipped, my skin still clammy, and the gauze on my arm barely holding together after 3 days of IV drips. I didn't go home because I felt better. I went home because they forced me to. When I arrived, the front yard was already crowded. Folding chairs lined the porch. A small table had been dragged out and stacked with pre-cooked deli trays and cheap balloons from a local dollar store. Someone had even printed a banner and hung it crookedly between 2 pillars. "Congrats, Vanessa, on your new car." Vanessa, my legal name. A name that suddenly felt so far away from me. Inside the living room smelled like microwaved meatballs and potpourri. My mom, Tracy, rushed out in a floral dress she hadn't worn since my high school graduation. "There she is," she chirped like a game show host. "Everyone come say hi to Vanessa. Our little breadwinner just bought herself a car." I stood in the doorway with my hospital wristbands still on. I didn't want to play this scene. I didn't want to smile for people who didn't know I'd been lying in a hospital bed 48 hours ago coughing up blood. I didn't want to pretend that I was proud of something I bought for my commute, not for them. Aunt May came over grinning and handed me a Diet Coke. "Heard it's a Volkswagen, that's nice." Derek wanted one too. There it was, the comparison. The invisible scoreboard that always placed Derek just 1 notch above me. "Where's the car?" someone shouted from the backyard. Before I could answer, Tracy jumped in. "She parked it in the garage. We'll bring it out later so y'all can take pictures." I never said they could do this. I never gave them permission to parade my car around like a family trophy. By the time the 3rd cousin asked me what my salary was and when I planned to upgrade to a real SUV, my head started to spin again. I excused myself to my bedroom, but my mother blocked the hallway. "Don't be rude," she hissed with a tight smile. "They came all this way to see you." "No, they came to see the car," I said softly. She ignored that. When I finally broke through and shut my door, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at my reflection in the vanity mirror. I looked like a guest in my own life. My hair was flat, my eyes were still sunken, and I hadn't even had a chance to unpack. Outside, laughter erupted. Someone must have told a joke. I wasn't laughing. I was holding my phone, rereading every message my mother had sent me that week. The threats, the guilt-tripping, the accusations that I was ungrateful. And now she was smiling for photos next to a car I bought, as if my pain was just another marketing prop for her performance. That night, when the guests left and I tried to retreat again, my mother knocked on my door. "Derek's staying the night. You'll sleep on the couch." I blinked. "You're giving my room to Derek. He's family. So am I. You're being dramatic. Don't make a scene." I stared at her. All the resentment, all the bruised memories, all the swallowed disappointments clawed their way back up. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I stood up, grabbed a pillow, and walked straight past her to the couch. But I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling for hours, heart pounding, with the realization that no matter what I gave them, money, obedience, my health, it would never be enough. They didn't love me. They loved the version of me that could be paraded in front of guests, the version that made them look good. And that version had just died. I was still on the couch when the sunlight filtered in, not that I'd slept. My spine ached from the lumpy cushions, but the ache was nothing compared to the dread pressing on my chest. I could hear footsteps upstairs, water running, cabinet doors closing. Tracy was already up humming as she cooked breakfast for our guests, as if last night hadn't happened, as if I hadn't been shoved out of my own bed. Paul came downstairs, neck still smelling faintly of beer. He grunted at me but said nothing. That was his specialty silence that felt like punishment. By the time Derek strolled in, freshly showered and wearing my high school hoodie like it was his, I'd had enough. "I need my room back," I said flatly. Tracy looked up from scrambling eggs. "Derek's only here for a day." "I don't care." Her eyes narrowed. "Are you seriously starting this again after everything we did last night?" I bit the inside of my cheek. I knew what was coming. "You're not going to ruin the vacation over a bed," she snapped. "You're driving like we planned." "There is no we," I said. "You planned. You decided. You announced. I never said yes." She slammed the spatula down. "I told everyone. Do you have any idea how that makes me look if you don't show up? That's not my problem anymore." Paul stood up. "Watch your tone." "No," I said, shaking now. "No, you don't get to pull the respect your elders card when you treat me like a chauffeur with a pulse." They froze. I grabbed my bag from the side table and walked toward the stairs. "You're not going anywhere," Paul warned. "Watch me." As I turned the corner, Tracy grabbed my wrist. "If you walk away, you can forget this family." I looked at her mascara already flaking at the corners of her eyes, hairline trembling, and I smiled. I already did. She released me like I'd burned her. Upstairs, I packed everything in 10 minutes. When I came down, Paul was blocking the front door. "You leave now, don't bother coming back." I met his eyes. That's the idea. Then I left not just the house, but the entire version of me they thought they owned. I didn't go far, just enough to breathe. I checked into a roadside motel 20 miles out, the kind with buzzing fluorescent lights and a view of the back of a liquor store. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. That night, I stared at the ceiling tiles and tried to remember the last time someone in my family asked me how I felt without twisting it back to themselves. When did I become the fallback plan for every inconvenience, the pride piece for every show they put on? Around midnight, my phone lit up, blocked call, then another, and another. I didn't answer. At 1:07 a.m., a message slipped through from Aunt May, not even my parents. "Vanessa, you need to stop this. You embarrassed your mother. You walked out like a child. Grow up." No mention of the injury, the fever, the blood, just concern about the optics. I didn't reply. By sunrise, there were 22 messages from the family group chat. Someone even tagged me in a picture of my empty chair at breakfast, captioned, "This is what ungrateful looks like." I turned the phone off and shoved it under a pillow. That afternoon, I went apartment hunting. Not to move immediately, I couldn't afford it yet, but to remind myself that a future without them was possible. One space had peeling linoleum and a window that faced a brick wall. I loved it, because no one would scream through that door. No one would throw guilt like dishes. No one would make me feel like my worth was tied to how well I could serve them. And maybe, just maybe, I'd wake up in that tiny apartment and feel human again. Not a prop, not a pawn, just Vanessa. 2 weeks after I stopped answering my name, showed up on the caller ID again. It wasn't Tracy. It wasn't Paul. It was the hospital. I froze, then picked up. "Is this Vanessa Carter?" the nurse asked. "Yes." This number was listed as next of kin for Paul Carter. He's been admitted after a fall at a construction site. Multiple fractures. He's conscious but unable to speak right now. The nurse paused. Should we expect you?" I looked around. My motel walls were bare. The air conditioner wheezed, but I was breathing. "No," I said softly. "You shouldn't." She didn't argue. That evening, I walked down to a corner diner, ordered waffles, read a book. Not because I didn't care, but because I cared too much for too long and they never did. The next day, Aunt May called. "Vanessa, your father's leg might need to be amputated. He's in so much pain. Your mother, she's barely eating." I waited. "She cries every night, says she made mistakes." "Did she say that to me?" I interrupted. Silence. I sighed. "You're all mourning a version of me that was never real to you. The obedient daughter who shows up, pays up, shuts up. That person doesn't exist anymore. But family is family," Aunt May snapped. "No, Family is love, not leverage. I hung up. That night, I wrote an email to Human Resources requesting a relocation opportunity. New city, new state, blank slate. I hit send before I could regret it. There was no funeral, but something had died. Their version of me, and I was ready to bury it for good. A week passed. I didn't answer the phone. Didn't open emails from Aunt May. Didn't check the voicemail labeled Tracy Carter. My silence was loud, and that terrified them more than any scream ever could. At work, I boxed up my cubicle. I hadn't told anyone the full story, just family estrangement and a fresh start. They nodded politely. That's the kind of phrase that comes wrapped in discomfort so no one digs deeper. The apartment I toured downtown was smaller than I expected, but it had light, so much light, and locks that I owned the key to. While signing the lease, the realtor asked if anyone else would be moving in. I said no, just me, and it felt good. Later that week, my old neighbor sent me a video. It was from a community meeting, a gathering in the town's cultural center. Tracy stood up, eyes puffy, voice shaking. My daughter abandoned us. After all we did, she left us when we needed her most. There were murmurs in the background, sympathetic sighs. A few people even hugged her. She cried in public, something she'd never done for me in private. She blocked us everywhere she continued. I don't even know if she's alive. I paused the video. No, Tracy, you don't get to perform grief for the crowd when I spent a childhood grieving your presence in silence. You don't get to rewrite the story. But I let them say what they need to say. Because I was no longer trying to explain myself. I was too busy living. I watched the city lights ripple across my bedroom wall, not flashing like the sirens back home, just calm, steady like breath. My first night in the new apartment, I lay awake for hours. No yelling behind paper-thin walls, no slamming doors, no hollow footsteps approaching with another demand. Just silence, and within it the faintest echo of my own heartbeat, my own rhythm, finally. That week, I got a small plant, one of those low-maintenance ones that people say even grief can't kill. I named it May. Not for my aunt. For the month, I signed my name to a future that no longer included them. At work, people stopped asking about my move. They just let me be. And somehow, that small grace, the absence of curiosity, felt more like love than anything I'd ever known at home. Sometimes I'd wonder if Tracy was still telling her story in grocery stores, at church, online. My daughter abandoned me. Maybe she was. And maybe someone believed her. But I didn't need to fix it anymore. Every morning, I woke up without needing permission. Every evening, I returned to a place that held no one's shadows but my own. Every time I said no to guilt, the voice inside me got stronger. I was not heartless. I was healing. I didn't hate them. I just stopped needing them. The wound became a scar. The scar became a reminder that I was worth more than my usefulness. And finally, I believed it. The softest goodbye I ever said was the one I whispered to the version of myself that still waited to be loved by people who never would.